All right, shalom, everybody. Welcome to the Wednesday night men's study. Shalom to everybody here. Your homes. Uh, we're going to be in First Corinthians chapter 8. Now, there's about 13 verses in First Corinthians chapter 8. So we're going to probably try to do a thorough, dissecting of these verses. We're going to do some harmonizing between the Torah and the prophets and the New Testament, show how they harmonize. And this chapter is going to be pretty good. Um, so we got 13 verses. We're probably going to do, let's do the first 6 verses, and then we can go back and break them down. Does anybody want to read the first 6 verses?
I'll read. I just need a second to get my app open here. Let me First Corinthians chapter 8. Where are we at here? First Corinthians 8. Okay, it says, now as touching things offered unto idols, we know that we all have knowledge. Knowledge puffeth up, but charity edifieth. And if any man think that he knoweth anything, he knoweth nothing, yet as he ought to know. But if any man love Yah, the same is known of him. As concerning therefore the eating of those things that are offered in sacrifice unto idols, we know that an idol is nothing in the world, and that there is none other Elohim but one. For though there be that are called gods, whether in heaven or in earth, as there be gods many and lords many, parentheses, but to us there is but one Elohim, the Father, of whom are all things, and we in him, and one Master, Yahusha, by whom are all things, and we by him. Um, yeah, interesting things in the first 6, and yeah, it's interesting in verse 2, and if any man think that he knoweth anything, he knoweth nothing, yet as he ought to know. It's like everything. I just like think about how everything is revealed by the Ruach, and the Ruach leads and guides us in all truth, and some people can get like conceited and puffed up in their own selves, thinking that they're all that or whatever, and it's not us. It's like I'm reminded that I'm nothing without the Ruach. It's like it's in Him that we live and move and have our being, and it's always it's interesting that even the writer Shaul, there's a passage where he mentions how he was given God allowed him to have a thorn in the flesh, and it was revealed to him that that thorn was there so that he wouldn't exalt himself above measure. And so it's interesting how like it's almost like lately I feel like the more knowledge I know is like the more I understand how much I don't know. It's like it's it's um it's a constantly a humbling thing because it's like you like grow up in Christianity, then you get to a place where you pretty much know what you're doing, but then Yah reveals how much you don't really know, and so it's like it's a humbling thing. So it's uh so yeah, and then the idols part, offering unto idols, that's an interesting subject. I know a lot of people get into food and should we eat partake of meat and all kind of it's a that's a rabbit hole. Um But it's interesting in Ezekiel when he was I forget what chapter it was, but y'all told him to bake bread with dung from a man, which is like, I mean, and then Ezekiel was like, please, like, well, he's like, Father, no, that's, I don't, and then the Most High was like, allow him to use the dung of a calf or something. And later on, it says that it was like a prophetic thing that there would come a time where we are scattered among the nations, that we will eat defiled bread among the nations, and how like it's an interesting subject because it's like people get into that rabbit hole of how our food is grown and sourced, and that's an interesting conversation there. But I don't want to take too much of the time. I'll just leave it at that.
Yeah, and praise Yah for the emphasis. So I like that you brought out the idea that Paul was mentioning about being puffed up because of knowledge, and I think that we have to just be considerate as to the information. That many times we have more confidence in the information than in the ruach. The ruach is what gives the increase, not the information. And what they were doing was just to focus on what he's responding to. We remember that in 1 Corinthians 7 verse 1, he made a statement saying, "Now concerning the things whereof you wrote to me," and then he goes on to his explanation. So he's expressing something, that the concerns that they wrote him to address. They asked him to address those things, and they were discussing the knowledge of eating foods offered to idols, and whether or not these Gentiles should eat foods offered to idols or eat clean meats, clean animals that were offered to pagan idols at one point. So this is kind of what he's trying to reveal to them, but he's also making them to submit to the Ruach rather than to information, scientific breakdowns. Look at these people and look at how they're acting. All of these different things that sometimes we do also. We build these explanations around a simple reality. The idol is nothing. What does he say in verse 4? Now concerning the things, the eating of those things that are offered to idols, that are sacrificed to idols, we know that the idol is nothing in the world, and that there is none other Elohim but one. So he's trying to bring the mindset into a reality of freedom. Like, I'm free from these false ideas. I'm free from these pagan perspectives. I'm now looking at things the way that Yah looks at. There's only one Elohim that exists. There's not different Elohims. So if I'm in my own home and I'm afraid to eat a food that was offered to a pagan idol, in your privacy of your own home, you don't have anything to be afraid of. We know there's no such thing as these gods. But what he was addressing, which he does address in Romans chapter 14 as well, where they were eating because they were not eating because they were not understanding the faith, or the teachings of the faith. And those who were stronger in understanding had to try to receive those who were weaker in understanding, but not to judge one another or condemn one another in their convictions. So likewise, he's doing the same thing here, trying to bring everybody to love one another uncondemningly. I don't know if that's a word, but not condemning each other, but trying to recognize each other's status with Yah. You are a child of Yah. I am a child of Yah. You have this conviction. I have this conviction. But let's talk about it so we can see if we can get our minds into the reality that there is no other Elohim but one. This is from verse 4. This is obviously from Deuteronomy 6:4. Hear, O Israel, Yahuwah our Elohim is one Yahuwah. He's one Yahuwah. So this is kind of like along the lines of repeating this truth from Torah to those who may misunderstand. Does anybody want to have anything else to say before I move? Oh, go ahead, Brother Rod.
Yes, sir. Yeah, no. Deuteronomy 6:4. I would go even a step further and say, this relates back to when Yahusha was questioned, what is the greatest commandment? And he says, love Yahuwah. And then he says, love your neighbor. And, we call those the two hanger laws because on these two hang all the law and the prophets. And it's interesting because I was just explaining this to somebody because they were asking me, okay, what's the difference between a law, statute, ordinance, and a judgment? So the understanding that Yahusha is giving to him is that all of the laws are encapsulated in these two. Everything else is a statute of those laws. So if the law is love Yahuwah and only Yahuwah, then if I'm worshiping a false idol, that's a statute of that law. If I'm, if he's telling me the law to love my neighbor, then I'm not going to steal from my neighbor. I'm not going to covet my neighbor's wife. Those are statutes of that law. And the judgments would be the punishment for breaking those laws. But here's the thing, this chapter encapsulates, loving Yahuwah, right? And loving your neighbor, because the other side of that, and that was a great backdrop you gave us, Jadiel. The other side of that is they were putting pressure and causing their brothers to stumble because of what they believed about the meat. So if I'm causing my brother to stumble, I'm not loving my neighbor. I'm not loving my brother. If I'm worried about an idol and putting too much emphasis on the idol, I'm not focusing on the one and only truth. And I'm giving too much attention to something that doesn't even exist. So absolutely, just wanted to kind of bring that out to expand on Deuteronomy 6:4.
I like what you mentioned. I want to kind of prove what you were saying about the two greatest commandments, verse 1 and verse 3, where it says, "Now concerning things offered unto idols, we know that we all have knowledge. Knowledge puffs up, but love edifies." So now he's talking about how the interaction between man will work. It won't work by emphasizing on all the knowledge that one has, but knowing how to express that knowledge. This is what Paul said in many other places where he's like, all things are lawful, but not all things are beneficial. I can tell you every single law in the scripture, but which one are you going to understand? So I rather give you understanding than give you a whole bunch of words. He's going to say that in 1 Corinthians 14 when we get there. And then you talked about this one of the other commandments, which is in verse 3. It says, "But if any man love Elohim, the same is known of him." Like we know if we love Elohim, he loves us. He knows us. He knows our intention. He knows our desire. So then it goes about being known of Yah, and then it goes into knowing that the idol is nothing. He knows that we know this idol doesn't exist. He knows that we know that there's no other Elohim but one. So therefore, when we approach these foods, it's with a clear conscience. But when our brother is approaching these idols, he's telling us in other places, he's telling us to be careful with the knowledge that you have. Be careful with the knowledge that you have, and be careful to make sure that you allow love to edify rather than letting your knowledge beat somebody down. Those are two different different perspectives he's trying to bring. Don't let your knowledge puff you up against your brother, but let your love edify, which means to build up your brother. These are two aspects that he's telling us to walk in. I think he does that I think in every book, this is kind of what he's focusing on. But I love the emphasis. And Rod, let me know, because I made your co-host. So if you want to say something, raise your hand so I could know, because I know you can't raise your hand. So I like that he's going from talking about how we're approaching truth and knowledge and edifying your brother, and going down to understanding the reality that there's one Elohim and that there's only one, to the point where in verse 5 and 6 he gives a certain breakdown, he gives a certain summary. In verse 5 and 6 he says, though there exists things that people call Elohim, whether in heaven or in earth, as there are Elohims, there's many Elohims and there's many masters. There's people call many things Elohim, people call many things master. But then he says he's bringing us back to the knowledge. He's bringing us back to what we ought to know as a people. He says here in verse 6, but to us there is one Elohim, the Father, whom are all things, and we are in him, and we have one master, Yahusha, Messiah, by whom are all things, and we are by him, meaning that we are in the Father by the Son. That's what it's saying. So there's this, we have to understand each other's differences, but don't judge each other's differences because you have the knowledge. But when you're sitting down discussing these things, let's bring everybody to the same reality. There's only one Elohim. I don't have to worry about my plate of chicken being in front of this Baphomet. If a plate of chicken is in front of Baphomet, I can easily take that plate of chicken and eat it. But if my brother, who thinks that this is against abomination against Yah, I won't consume it, because I need to edify you. So I won't take it to give you wrong thoughts about my walk with Yah. So I'm going to leave it alone so we can come to the same reality. He breaks this down in multiple parts of Corinthians and Romans to show that this is what he means by verse 1. But love edifies. Love builds up your brother's knowledge, wisdom. It builds up your brother's wisdom. Knowledge or information makes a person feel like they're more valuable. But look at what it says. Verse 2, if a man thinks that he knows anything, he knows nothing but what he's supposed to know. He knows what Yah made him know. So either way, that person is not valuable on his own accord, which many people think that because they have information that they're much better or more valuable of a person because they're able to, even a teacher, that we're more valuable because we teach. That's not true. That's not true at all. Teaching is one of the gifts, and that those gifts are given to all the set apart ones. So Paul is trying to teach the reality of a humble mind and where our mind should be, but he's also trying to teach the reality of how to think towards things offered to idols as well. And then he's also revealing that there's only one Elohim, and that's the Father. And then there's one Master, that's the Son. But go ahead, Brother Rod.
Yeah, that verse 6 when you said where it says yet for us. So you made it very clear in what he's saying to those that are included in the us, right? This is what we believe. But in him explaining to them that idols are nothing, in him explaining to them of how they are to love their brother and to not cause their brother to stumble, he doesn't totally cut off the whole idols as a whole, because to those that worship these idols, he tells us later, these are real. You know what I mean? He says in 10:20, 1 Corinthians 10:20, he says, rather that the things which the Gentiles sacrifice, they sacrifice to demons and not to Elohim. And I do not want you to have fellowship with demons. So it's still a real thing to those that believe in those things, but to us, we need to have this understanding here first, so that we're able to control ourselves when we get a couple chapters later. Like you said, he's addressing all of the things that they wrote to him, asking him about, telling him about. He's addressing them. So I like how he's dissecting it piece by piece, because he's laying out the case and then tearing it down. So good stuff.
No, absolutely. I like that you brought out, because when we get there, it goes into more detail about the reality that's in the mind, the reality to Yah. And this is the thing: there's a reality to Yah, and then there's the reality of conscience. The conscience is what makes us feel guilty or innocent. But Yah is trying to reveal his mind so you can link your mind with him and not put yourself in guilty, making yourself feel guilty for something that Yah is not even looking at you to cause you to feel that guilt. So when you look at this, I like that the reality is that there's only one Elohim. But then in 1 Corinthians 10, the reality is that there are demons, that they are devils. So again, he's bringing us into another perspective of the reality later on, where he's like, we need to focus on what Yah says is acceptable, what Yah says he doesn't want us to do, and why he says that, and the reality he wants us to have. But then the reason why we're not partaking in it in front of everybody, especially the brethren that are not believing or young in belief, is because the devils have created this teaching, and the devils are being worshipped by these false perspectives, and this also brings us to a lot of different things, like Christmas and all of these things that people do that were created by inspiration of the devil. Hasatan created this inspiration to worship other Elohim beside the one true Elohim, Yahuwah. So the what Paul is trying to do, and what the Torah does, is it brings us to a safe reality where we can feel confident in what Yah is telling us to do. And we don't have to feel guilty because of these made up ideas or made up, Messiah had to deal with a whole bunch of made up traditions that was not inspired by Yah. It was inspired by devils. Anything that causes us to, one, be afraid and guilty of things that Yah is not saying to do, two, make void the commandments and uphold tradition.
Oh man, looks like we lost y'all. Um, Brother Brian, go ahead.
Oh yeah, I was just it's yeah, definitely interesting with wisdom there. I was just thinking like in our modern times, how this can be applied in modern life. Like for example, I'm thinking like around the holidays where you have like say you're at work and there's like a Christmas party and there's Christmas candy and I mean all this stuff and you might be working with a coworker and y'all are like walking the walk and things like that. And then so it's like I'm just giving examples like in modern times because today we don't really see people overtly sacrificing food to idols, but it's more subtle today than it was back then, I believe. So it's like I'm trying like really kind of trying to give some perspective in like modern times. Is it like in that situation, say you're hungry and you don't celebrate Christmas, but you just gonna just get some food because it's lunchtime, you hungry, whatever like that. But in the context of it, they're celebrating Christmas. Like, is that like trying to like bring it to like modern contemporary times? Is that sort of like what we deal with today? It's like not necessarily a sin to partake of the food, even though like it's like a Christmas party, but it's like because some people debate that. It's like, oh no, they're celebrating paganism and all this stuff. So I'm just trying to give like a modern spin to what Paul is talking about and seeing like, am I thinking, is my thinking right or not according to what you all think?
Well, I think specific to what he's talking about here, there is an actual understanding that the meat that they were purchasing was meat that was sacrificed to idols in the marketplace, and that they weren't eating, because we see in Romans he's talking about those that just eat vegetables, because there were people that wouldn't, sustain from eating meat. I think in the case of a Christmas party, that's more of a convicting thing, because for me, I've been in that situation where, the company department's having a Christmas party. And the all the food that's brought is brought there so that they can, eat it in honor of this Christmas holiday. Like, I don't partake in that.
Hey, brothers, can you guys hear me?
Yeah, we hear you. I wouldn't partake in that. I would go and get myself another lunch and do something different. Um, so, but hey, I think this here, what Shaul was talking about, is specific to them knowing whether the food was, or whether the meat was sacrificed to idols or whether it wasn't, because there was a case where they didn't know, so they were saying, no, this meat is sacrificed to idols, don't eat it, and then causing their brothers not to, or the brothers that were, then they would say that they were doing the wrong thing. So Paul is speaking against them causing each other to fall based upon something or the knowledge they didn't have or that they did have, and then says there is no idols. There's only one. Idols are nothing. So I think he's bringing a perspective for their understanding here. So I don't know if that makes sense to you, Brian, but that's what I see there. Go ahead, Jadiel.
Yeah, I'm not sure. Are you there, Jorio? Yeah, because I'm trying to like what I'm trying to correlate is how would this apply to us today, in modern times, because we don't see people like overtly dedicating food. Like we do have things like halal, like that's starting to become more prominent with the Muslims, where some markets are now carrying halal foods or meats and things. That's starting to become more mainstream because we're getting more that population, the Islamic or Muslim populations are starting to become more prevalent. So markets are starting to cater to them more. Other than that, yeah, I struggle to kind of like see us how this is significant to us today. So
Yeah,
that's why
I think the example you just brought out with the halal meats, Philly is synonymous for halal markets. 52nd Street in Philly, there's plenty of halal markets where they have the meats. People go and they only the halal. That would be a perfect example for us, not to. I would definitely make that correlation to that. Because there's other places to purchase the meat. This case, there was only one place, it looks like, in Corinth, in that marketplace, where they had to buy, the food that they needed. So,
yeah, because that was their version of like halal. Like back then, that was their only choice, and it seems like what Paul or Shaul is saying. Yeah, this is the only choice you have. So don't allow that, because this is what it sounds like. It sounds like it's not halal like per se, but it sounds like that's what their version of it would be back then.
right,
He's saying, yeah, the food is halal, but it's okay for you to eat it unless it causes your brother to stumble.
right.
Yeah, I'm just I was just like was looking at that. Uh, that's what I'm seeing there. I could be wrong, but that's just what I'm seeing there. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Paul was definitely expressing the liberty in, not having a problem with those particular meats.
Mm-hmm.
And because he addresses something similar, like we talked about in Romans, where he says, the weaker eats only vegetables, you know, because he doesn't have the freedom to eat the meat, So I think he's addressing, the reality of what they're facing as well. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I do. I do agree. You have a choice. Like we have choices here in our markets to purchase such things or not, and there's even like kosher meats you can buy that are raised under a different standard than other meats. So we have options, and so I understand that like in our modern times, yeah, I wouldn't buy halal because I have other options, but in a situation where you may not, maybe you might find yourself one day in an Islamic country and that's the only option you have. And so are you going to not eat any meat whatsoever because of that, or are you going to have that understanding that Shaul is trying to bring out and and partake and just like bless your food and eat?
Right. Brother Nene. Jadiel, you back?
Yeah, I guess I understand what Brother
Yeah,
Brian is
I'm
trying
here.
to.
Can you guys hear me good?
Yeah.
Oh, should I continue?
Yeah, go ahead, brother.
Okay. So I guess I
Okay, go
understand what
ahead, brother Nene.
Brother.
And yes, continue. Sorry, brother.
Yeah.
I'm trying to look at what Brother Brian is saying from another perspective. Here in Africa, it's very common. It's common knowledge that people engage in witchcraft in their businesses, and I know it's not in Africa alone. So you find people going to visit witches and all those demonic entities for their businesses, and actually these people prosper. So that includes food business, cloth industry, and all these things. And a good example we can see in the music industry, right? So most of these people who we say they are in quote unquote Illuminati, you'll find them doing certain rituals and sacrifices before releasing certain songs. And these songs come to become hit songs and infatuate the people. So I'm trying to look at it from the perspective of it's foods, but yes, foods is it's anything that's entering into our system, entering into our minds. Everything is permissible to us. but not everything is permissible, is beneficial, right? So let's say in the case of this song, we know it's being offered to these idols, quote unquote. But now that we are living in the newness of the Ruach, it shall not have that impact, that swaying impact that it has on the masses. So we may listen to it, yes, but it should not defile us, right? So yes, it's foods, but what is it entering our bodies? What is entering this temple? Because food is anything. Bread, the bread of life, you know? So I'm trying to look at it from a broad perspective, but I may be wrong. And
Well, I think what Paul is saying here. Okay, so let's look at it this way. There there are a group of people that are getting this meat, and they are taking it to these pagan temples, and they're worshiping, praying over it, and sacrificing it to their false gods. Right? Paul is saying that happens. But what he's saying to them is those who purchase it among you, to us, we are not taking that meat and doing those same things. We're eating it. We're not sacrificing it. We're not giving it. We're not partaking in it as they do with their idols. And it's okay to eat. That's what he's saying. He's making a distinction between those that are sacrificing that same meat to idols and those in his nation, in his group, that are purchasing it to eat. He's telling them, to us, there is but one Elohim, you know? So we're not buying it and thinking and praying the same way they are. We're doing it this way. It is okay for us to consume. That's basically what he's telling them. You guys see that?
yeah, for sure, for sure, for sure. And
Praise.
I guess in the large, okay, in the big outlook of things, you may find yourself purchasing this thing, not actually knowing that it's been sacrificed to idols, because a lot of things, even in the present reality, are sacrificed to idols. Things we find in supermarkets, things we find in, grocery stores. But it's okay for us to, without that knowledge, it's okay for us to do it because we know everything that we are doing it as unto the Master. So we should not have our conscience defiled in that respect. And I understand, yeah.
Right. He's calling us to be sensitive. Jadiel was talking earlier about the conscience, and really, he's causing us to be sensitive to the conscience of Elohim, or the Ruach that resides in us, because he says in verse 5, he says, "For even if there are so-called gods, right, whether in heaven or on earth, as there are many gods and many lords, yet for us there is only one." So that is not our outlook. That is not our perspective. That is not our worship. That is not our sacrifice. We're buying this meat to eat. Eat on. That's what he's saying. And that's why he's letting them know they have the liberty. They don't have to make a law to themselves and put themselves in bondage for something the Father is not giving them. That's what he's saying. So hope that's clear. Brother Jadiel, take the wheel, brother.
Yeah, can you guys hear me? Can
Yeah,
you
we can
guys
hear
hear
you.
me
Yeah,
good?
we can hear you. Yeah, we can hear you, brother.
Yeah, no, I agree with Rod. That's why Romans 14, 1 Corinthians, the one that we're reading now, other people have a different perspective than us. We have one, they have many. We have one perspective, they have different perspective. They have philosophy and tradition, we have truth and absolute truth to that. So that's why he says the idol is nothing and we can eat on. And then it says, when someone says it was offered to idols, then it tells you not to eat it for that person's sake that believes that. I'm not sure where. I think is it in chapter 10? Yeah, so it's in chapter 10, um, verse 27. 1 Corinthians 10, verse 27 to 20 to 30.
Sounds like we lost Jai again. You there, brother? All right, let's read the passage he just brought out. He was saying 1 Corinthians 10. So we read verse 20 earlier in chapter 10. Let's read from 27 to 1. He says, if any of those who do not believe invites you to dinner, and your desire to go eat whatever is set before you, asking no questions for conscience sake, right? You don't ask for conscience sake so that you don't know. But if anyone says to you, this was offered to idols, then do not eat for the sake of the one who told you for conscience sake. For the earth is Yahuwah's and all its fullness. Conscience, I say, not your own, but that of the other. For why is my liberty judged by another man's conscience? But if I partake with thanks, why am I evil spoken of for the food over which I give thanks? Therefore, whether you eat or drink or whatever you do all to the glory of Elohim. Give no offense either to the Yahudim or to the Greeks or to the church or the assembly of Elohim, just as I also please all men in all things, not seeking my own profit, but the profit of many, that they may be saved. So we see clearly a situation where you're invited somewhere and for conscience sake, you don't ask. But if someone tells you for the sake of that person, don't partake because you'll cause that brother to stumble. So that's what Brother Jalio was pulling out there. Praise y'all. You back, brother?
Hey, brother Rod, can you take
Yeah, I
over
hear
for a
you.
little bit? I'm not sure if my internet is gonna lighten up.
Okay. Okay. Praise y'all. All right, so we left off in verse 7. Who wants to read? I guess we could take it to the end of the chapter, verse 7 to verse 13. Who wants to take that?
I'll read, bro.
All right.
It says, howbeit there is not in every man that knowledge, for some with conscience of the idol unto this hour eat it as a thing offered unto an idol, and their conscience being weak is defiled. But meat commendeth us not to Elohim, for neither if we eat are we the better, neither if we eat not are we the worse. But take heed lest by any means this liberty of yours become a stumbling block to them that are weak. For any man seek, if any man see thee which has knowledge sit at meat in the idol's temple, shall not the conscience of him which is weak be emboldened to eat those things which are offered to idols? You want me to finish off the chapter you said?
Yeah, go ahead, bro.
Okay. And through thy knowledge shall the weak brother perish, for whom Messiah died. But when you sin so against the brethren and wound their weak conscience, you sin against Messiah. Wherefore, if meat make my brother to offend, I will eat no flesh while the world standeth, lest I make my brother to offend. But a big part of that ending right there to me was the fact of putting your brother before you.
Yeah.
And not, and I take that example in all things, not just in this portion of meat, but in all things. I don't want to do anything that's going to become a stumbling block to my brother. But of course, in this context, it's an interesting context because of, like you guys have been talking about, the meat offered to idols. That's what it is. And I think sometimes there probably is some people who may take it out of context and say, nah, see, this is why you can eat whatever you want. This is why you can eat pork and shrimp and anything you like, because, but now if there's a brother in the situation that says they can't eat these things, you shouldn't eat those things. Right. And you're like, and they're just like way off in left field. So, but yeah, to me, I was thinking about that at the end, like how deep he said in verse 12, but when you sin so against the brethren and wound their weak conscience, you sin against Messiah. And that's pretty deep, when you sin against Messiah, again, showing that Mashiach is in you and we in him. So, Shalom.
Yeah, it's funny you say people take it out of context, because the passage we just read in chapter 10 is what they use. They say as long as you bless it, you could take a rack of ribs, as long as you bless it, you're good. But it's not talking about stuff that's not food. It's talking about specific to the situation that they're dealing with food that they saw being sacrificed to idols, bought in that marketplace. And I like how you focused on sin, because all throughout the chapter, sin is never mentioned. He talks about knowledge. He talks about knowing that there's only one Elohim. He talks about idols being nothing. He talks about knowing. He talks about the weaker and the stronger brother. But then he says, basically, knowing all of this, knowing everything that we just talked about, now that you know, if you go ahead and you do it anyway, you are sinning. You're sinning because you're causing your brother to stumble. Like, if I know that you, JP, have a problem, you invite me to your house, and I bring some meat. You ask me where I got it from, but I already cooked it up. And you said, man, you bought it from so-and-so. Man, do you know what they do down there? Man, I can't eat that meat, And then I go ahead and I say, well, I already cooked it. Sauce is on it. It's marinated. And I start ripping it up right in front of you. I'm not loving you. We talked earlier about, the first and second commandment, love Yahuah your Elohim and love your neighbor. And I'm breaking those two. I'm breaking the statutes of those commandments, of those laws, by causing you to stumble, because I want to go ahead and use my freedom in a way that causes you to be hindered. And that's not love. Go ahead, Brian.
Yeah, I was just thinking about too how like it even goes beyond well I see it goes beyond just the meat thing too. Like some people have different views on alcohol, or just using it as an example. And like with me, I don't see no problem with partaking in moderation. And the scripture talks about that. But if I have someone over, a brother or sister over, and I know that they or they either had a problem with alcohol or they feel some kind of way, then it's like I'm not going to partake or or offer it, because I already know it's like that's a stumbling block for that person. or it may not even be a stumbling block. They just may be offended by it or whatever. It's just like it's an interesting thing of just like I'm just looking at like a holistic approach to it, even in other areas and stuff. So it's an interesting topic. Yeah.
Absolutely. I think we got to be conscious of what we have liberty in within the confines of not breaking Yah's law, and knowing that it can be sin because we're causing our. Brian, you bring this brother over my house. I got wine bottles stacked up. We're gonna have a glass of wine with dinner. But this brother just got out of Alcohol Anonymous and came into the faith. I need to put that alcohol away. I need to put that wine away. We need to drink water, juice, whatever, so that brother doesn't stumble. And I think that so often people try to put their liberties on other people that struggle with certain things. Now, I think Paul does a good job here is because he brings clarity to the situation, but overall love prevails, meaning that not only am I conscious of the Ruach that's in me, I'm conscious of what you struggle with as my brother. And I'm not going to do it because if I do it, then I'm not loving you properly. I'm not loving you the way Yah wants me to love you. So that's a great example that you just used. JP?
I thought the verse here as well was interesting to me because he says in well, the first verse I read was 7. Is it 7? Howbeit there is not in every man. No, it's not it. It's 8. But meat commendeth us not to Elohim. For neither if we eat are we the better, neither if we eat not are we the worse. And so that's an interesting verse. He's like he's really bringing it home in the sense of saying, hold on, like meat doesn't make you closer to Yahuwah, and it doesn't like further you away from Yahuwah. So something interesting in that. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that to speak on verse 8, but I thought that was an interesting verse to say it like that. He's like, meat's not bring you closer to him. And, it's like kind of like what we're talking about. He's telling the people at this time in Corinth, he's like, hold on, like you're focusing on the meat right now. I'm trying to give you some knowledge. So I don't know. If you have something to say on that one, that'd be beautiful.
Well, part of what was going on in Corinth was the same thing that was going on in Rome, and we saw it mentioned in Acts 2. But the deal was because there was clearly idol worshipers that were buying the meat, right? There was a consensus among some of the Yahudim and the Gentiles. Okay, we're not going to buy this meat because they're sold by either idol worshipers or idol worshipers buy this meat. So we're only going to eat vegetables, right? And then you had the people that were saying, man, ain't nothing wrong with that meat. You want to eat vegetables. You think I'm going to eat meat and it's going to make me stronger. You know what I mean? So the whole idea of the meat drawing you closer, or if you didn't eat the meat, are you any worse? You know what I mean? I think that's what he's talking into, this whole understanding. Like, you're not better if you don't eat meat. You're not better if you only eat vegetables. You're not worse if you do eat it. You're not worse if you only eat it. You understand what I'm saying? So he's bringing the whole understanding of what they questioned, okay, into the context of one being weaker, one being stronger, one causing one to stumble because of the actions of another, just in the freedom that they had. Like, I can't be so concentrated on the freedom that I have because I've been in the faith for 20 years to ignore you who just came in the faith 2 weeks ago and struggles with some things. I got to be sensitive to you because I'm the mature believer, so not to cause you to fall. Because if I do it and knowing what my conscience is saying, then I'm sinning first against Yahuwah and against you. So that's what he's breaking down there in that verse in particular. Praise Yah. This is a good chapter. JP.
and And then speaking in this mindset, we kind of going back to 5 and 6. I always took this chapter, and I always take it for the understanding that he is showing as well, that he says, for though there be that are called gods or deities, and in the scripture says deities, but the translation can be gods, whether in heaven or on earth, as there be gods many and masters many. But to us there is but one Elohim, the Father, Yahuah, of whom are all things. And so it's like this. I'm just going back there because to me, he was taking me as I was reading, like, whoa, like, remember, like, there's many powers or these deities that people call their power, like, oh, this is, this right here, meat is like we were speaking about earlier, offered up to this god or that god or whatever. He's like, but all those are nothing. He's like, you know what I mean? And you guys probably talked about it, but I came in late. So, I mean, I was just excited because when people say, oh, I believe in God, I'm like, wait a minute, be specific, because of what Paul's saying here. I always think of that way. But there's a cross reference I have for verse 8 that, it's the same thing. It's kind of in the same mindset of Romans 14:15. But if thy brother be grieved with thy meat, now walkest thou not love, destroy not him with thy meat, for whom Messiah died. Again, we're seeing that same example, what he's speaking of in 1 Corinthians.
Right.
Don't destroy your brother. Go ahead, brother.
Yeah, no, yeah, absolutely. What you brought out in 5 and 6, we were talking about earlier, with the emphasis on, us knowing that there are idol worshipers, right? There are people that buy this meat and they do all kinds of strange things with it, but in verse 6, like he says, but to us, there's only one, so it doesn't matter what they believe. Like, they can do whatever they want to do with their meat, but who Yahuwah is. You know who Yahuwah, your Elohim is. Eat the meat, man. Go ahead and eat the meat. Enjoy the meat. But listen, if you can't eat the meat, if your conscience won't let you get past it, then I'm not going to eat the meat either. I'm okay with that. That's me loving you, And we talked earlier how the first 2 commandments, Yahusha answered the question. He says, love Yahuwah, your Elohim, love your neighbor. On these 2 hang all the law and the prophets. Both of those are mentioned in this chapter. I'm loving Elohim. There are no idols. I'm loving my brother. I'm loving my neighbor, because I'm not going to cause him to stumble by expressing the freedoms that I have, And how does that relate to us? It relates to us, in the sense that, some of us, are a little more seasoned than others. We know a little bit more, So we have some knowledge of some things, We understand the scriptures a little more. But we have to always be sensitive and remember why we went what we were when we came in, and meet people where they are. If somebody struggles with something, we can't laugh at them. We got to say, nah, brother, and share a testimony. And if that brother or sister can't get over whatever they're struggling with, then we stay there with them. We don't push on and go back to our place and then cause that brother or sister to have a hard time, have a difficult time, walk away from the faith, right? Because that's what happens next. Because they say, oh, that person don't care about me. They drank a whole bottle of wine. So praise God. Brother Brian and then JP.
Yeah, I was thinking about, like, because I always think about, like, the whole Bible, like everything in scripture and stuff, and like I was thinking about Daniel just now, like in that situation in Daniel 1, chapter 1, where he refuses to partake of the king's meat, but we don't, like, it's interesting because it's like how that whole outcome, how like him and his crew, they end up looking better than the rest everybody else because they didn't partake of the king's meat. So I just find that like that interesting, like as like something that's like different events in throughout history that are recorded, like concerning a specific topic. But the only thing I can say about like Daniel's case is we don't know like exactly, because you mentioned earlier, Brother Rod, that yeah, the context about it is it doesn't give us license to eat anything we want to eat, like scavengers, like pork and all that. It's just there's things that are not food. And so like in that context, we don't know exactly what the king's meat consisted of,
Right.
which it could have been anything. And so yeah, I just wanted to just like I like to go back in history and get like draw things out and like almost like sometimes I approach like a court case, like in cases they set up precedents and for the rest of time, and so you can go back and throughout and see how other cases were ruled on and all that kind of stuff. So I kind of like approach the New Testament like that. Where do we see this in Torah? Basically, where's the precedent set in Torah and
Right.
And stuff. So yeah, just throw that out there as just something to chew on and everything. But yeah, that's
No,
it.
that's a great example. And I like how you put it. Like we don't know what the king's meat was. Like it says the king's meat. It didn't say food. You know what I mean? It said the king's meat. It could have consisted of everything under the sun. You know what I mean? And Daniel and them weren't going to get down like that. You know, so very good observation as to abstaining from something that for them was either a stumbling block or something that they thought would cause or bring their body harm, their temple harm. So praise Yah. JP?
Yeah, no, I was just thinking about this example. Out here, there was a yogurt shop, and my wife was saying that the yogurt shop was like I don't know if it was Jewish, but it was like, in the Jewish practice to make things kosher, they pray over it, and they make it kosher. So it's the same thing. It's the same. You equate it to halal. It's the same thing of the Muslims. They're doing the same thing, and I remember being in that situation, and she's like, "What do you?" I said, "Man, I'm gonna go get some yogurt if we want yogurt." Like I don't, and
right.
I was, and at that time, I wasn't really. I just knew that, like that doesn't apply to me. Now I do use the kosher sense for the prerequisite that they have
Right.
they use. I say, wow, man, they really had to go an extra length to make it kosher. So
Yeah.
it's not a bad thing, but then we start thinking about it. I'm like, that's not the standard for me. It don't have to be kosher when I go to the store. It don't gotta be, because I'm gonna fool myself. Then I'm looking for their guidance. You know what I mean? And at times, we were talking about this on the Monday study, and we were speaking about how there's so much like GMO and non-GMO, organic, and all these things, and no preservatives, and I'm like, if you go into that mindset and you're like, yo, I don't want to eat no preservatives, all organic, you can go crazy.
Yeah.
And I put it in the same mindset, because at times I'm like, I'm trying to get an In-N-Out burger. I'm just trying to go to this little, give me a burger, and I don't want to know, like, right, I'm not trying to trip on like where the burger this. Now
Right.
some brothers,
it's almost
you
like,
know what I mean?
It's almost like don't even like Paul said, don't ask. You know what I mean?
Right.
He said it. Don't ask. Don't tell me what's in a Burger King burger. I love the flame boiled burger. Don't tell me it's fat in there that I can't eat, because I want to eat it,
Because then you're stuck.
That's true. Brian actually brought that up earlier, because we were talking about eating halal, and I was just like, I'm not going to get halal. But, when it boils down to it, the point Brian was making was similar to the point here. And if that's all we got, You know, it can be halal, it can be balal, it can be whatever. That's what they believe. To me, to us, it's only one Yahuwah. So I'm buying the meat, we're gonna cook it up, and we're gonna come together and we're gonna eat. You know, but if you stumble, then we're gonna eat. We're just gonna grill these vegetables. You know what I mean? I'll throw some corn on the cob on the grill, and some asparagus and
Yeah, and I also think about when I go to my mom's house. See, my mom's a Christian, but she doesn't keep the dietary instructions.
Right.
So, and there's been times I'm like, Mom, I don't know, what is this right here? Like, because some of the Mexican food, it looks blended. Like you don't know sometimes. You're like, it's like a soup plate or whatever, and I'm like, oh. And there's been times I'm like, I gotta test it. I'm like, nah, this ain't beef.
Yeah,
and I'm
it's
like,
funny because
it's hard.
I see you, Will. We bought some Chinese food, some chicken fried rice recently. And my wife was like, I don't know. It might have been a couple pieces of something else in there. And I was like, yeah. I said, I ain't taste nothing but the chicken. Hopefully it wasn't nothing else in there. But nah, I mean, you have to be mindful of those things too. Sometimes they slide a couple pieces of pork up in that beef. So we got to be mindful to know what we're buying and where we're buying from. But, like Shaul said, don't ask, when if you know you're buying the right thing, don't ask, Brother Will, go ahead, man.
You guys are cracking me up here. Yeah, this is it's a wonderful study. I just been kicking back, listening to all you brothers chime in on this subject. And Brian, you're on fire tonight, brother. I'm chasing you down, man. But yeah, when it comes down to for me, it's very simple. If it doesn't break the dietary laws, Leviticus 11, we can eat it, even if it's sacrificed to idols. That's what I'm gathering tonight. The stumbling of others, as you was breaking down, brother, that are at different levels. We have to be sensitive to where everyone is at. So much in this chapter, man, and but it's not a difficult chapter. It's just one that it just takes maybe going over because there's a lot of information in here. But it's very edifying chapter because it really does teach us how to deal with so many different scenarios. Like Brian brought up earlier, the situation about Christmas, and you also brought up your conviction. How you just don't have anything to do with it because that's within your conviction. I've been in certain scenarios like that where sometimes the boss, they'll order in on some food, and they're celebrating either Easter or New Year's or some, one of these pagan holidays, and they'll set something aside in the driver's room for us. And I'll take it and I leave and I go upon my scheduled run there. So, in situations like that where I'm not in the mix, where, because your ruach will weigh heavy on you if you start to blend in a little where you shouldn't be. I'm sure we and that's why Brian, I think, brought it up as well, because it seems to be a little gray section there that we have to be careful with. But yeah, I agree, man. It's very sensitive to when we gather around loved ones or friends or co-workers, how we handle ourselves when it comes to this subject, and not become so dogmatic and so condemning with our wind, because we're supposed to be the salt, not there to condemn anybody by our actions and what we believe in. So, thank you for the study. This is real good stuff here, man. I'm just really enjoying it. Yep.
Yeah, no, that's great what you shared, man. And I think that brings clarity to, Brian's question, and, how does that apply today? we have to look at all those different things. We have to look at, the kosher versus the halal versus, not knowing what people do in that particular establishment, how they slaughtered their animals. Did they strangle them? Did they drain all the blood? Some of those things we don't have to worry about today, but we could, depending on where we buy our food from. When you bring in the whole idea of, family and friends and this world's holiday system, you have to weigh with your conscience. I think what you said is vital, Will, as far as being able to be a light but yet not partaking in the same festivities. There was a question in our men's group earlier. A brother asked about participating in the Christmas holidays with his family. And I think Jadiel and JP were answering the question for the brother, and both were similar in their responses and saying, listen, partake with your family so as not to be, a stumbling block for them. But at the same time, don't compromise yourself by partaking in the festivities that they do. Have some set apartness even in your involvement with family matters so that they can see you. We have some some of our members still celebrate Thanksgiving with their families. Celebrate it. Not to necessarily feast, but being with family members and explain to them why you don't partake in certain things, if they ask you, but, I think we have to be mindful not to violate what we know the Ruach is telling us not to violate when it comes to his word. And sometimes when you're in a family situation, it can get, like you said, Will, it can present us with a gray area where we're confused on what to do, and for the most part, we don't always respond correctly. A lot of times we reject to the point where we stand off, so much so we're not even being seen as set apart because that's not the love that we're showing to our family members. I can have my mother come over 2 days before Christmas to have a beautiful dinner, but not go to the house when they have a Christmas dinner.
Right.
We can make alternative opportunities so we don't alienate our family members by showing that we can still protest in love, but still partake in family gatherings in some kind of way. So there's different ways that you can do that. And I think that, these types of passages kind of present us with those questions and how we should live in those instances, because we get it wrong a lot, and we push people away by being ignorant to what the Father is truly telling us to do sometimes. But there are some times where we got to stand flat-footed and say, no, I'm not going to eat the king's meat. I'm just not going to do it, so praise Yah. Praise Yah.
Yeah, that's someone just showing up in family and just coming at you with a Christmas gift. That's a tough situation to handle there. You got to, you're smiling because it sounds like you've been in that scenario, but
Yeah.
that's a tough one on how to respond to that, because
yeah, we actually the first time Christmas came around when we came into the faith, my mother-in-law insisted, you're not going to stop me from buying Christmas gifts for my grandson.
I've heard that before.
And we literally, listen, Brian might remember this. We literally, during fellowship, we were on fellowship. This is way back when we were all one group. And we got to notice that we had packages for Christmas packages for my son. And we just returned the sender. You know what I mean? We told you, and it was hard to do that.
Wow.
But we told you, we're not doing that. Send them a gift, give them a gift another time. Don't put no Christmas wrapping on it. We don't roll like that. You can buy your grandson a gift anytime you want to. but you're gonna stand it over here with green Christmas trees and red band ribbons around it. Nah, it violates what we believe, you know, and we don't want him having that confused understanding. You know, he's young. So yeah, family member, you know, I can remember the first time we didn't do Thanksgiving. And my mom said, you know, but it's Thanksgiving. You know, and I had to tell Mom, I'm not coming. You know, not that Thanksgiving or participating in Thanksgiving is necessarily spoke against in Scripture, because it's not. It's a whole nother situation for us with Thanksgiving and why we don't celebrate it. But you know, I think at that particular time we probably could have did it a different way. And you learn how to deal with family members. You learn how to deal with, you know, understanding, you know, how you express to them the way that you live and how you can help them understand it, but also continue a relationship so that they don't feel shunned or violated outside of you standing on Yah's word. You know what I mean? Because we can push our family members and friends away, you know, on things that aren't necessarily biblical just because we think we're doing the right thing, right? I think all of us have been in that situation.
It goes back to what you mentioned, that there comes a point where you may have to put your foot down to where you wish you wouldn't have to put. So that was a good example you gave there, you know, and then it makes it more difficult when it's a parent or a mother, you know, because we're sensitive like that, but towards our elders. But yeah, I agree. I had to do this. I don't want to take up much. I know we want to move on to it, but I had to do the same thing with my mother. And ironically enough, my mother is now on the verge of this walk. She's actually studying Torah, so I'm working with her a little bit, and she's actually doing baby steps now, you know, and I'm very proud of her. But in the beginning, she was like, "What is this thing you're into?"
Yeah.
You know.
I mean, family members will cause it. My family tried to call an intervention, like we were in a cult or something one time. We had to break out the scriptures and we had to have a Bible study with my family one time because they thought we were like in a cult, you know. So praise Yah for those opportunities, though. JP, and then we'll close.
Yeah, no, as you brothers were speaking, I was thinking about the intentional, you know, the intentional part of people. When they intentionally know that you don't celebrate any of the, you know, for instance, Christmas and Easter, and they intentionally still try to push that on you. Or, you know, going back to the chapter, they know you don't, you know, eat this kind of meat. And then all of a sudden they bring this kind of meat and this is what they made for dinner. And they tell you to come over to eat dinner.
Yeah.
You know, it's these intentional parts that I'm like, it's terrible because they're not living the scriptures out. Now, of course, if they're not a biblically sound person, they don't want to live like that, then it doesn't really apply to them. They're just being mean. You know what I mean? Plain and simple.
Yeah.
But and so I think of it that way, like I think of it that way. I just want to leave it at that, is that there's an intentional area that I see some people they do, and some people they do it ignorantly where they don't know that you don't celebrate this. And so they're like, oh, I didn't even, you know, so it's just one of those areas that I'm sensitive to, and I like have to look at the person and be like, Mom, you already know, Mom, come on, we've been doing this. But if it's like an aunt from out of town that really don't ever see us, and you know, then I'm like, I'm a little bit more okay. I'm gonna give you some slack. You know what I mean? Go ahead.
Or they don't let you forget your history. You know what I mean? Because I remember this was years ago. And this didn't even have anything to do with faith. I had just stopped eating pork. You know, I was younger, in my 20s, and I had went over my parents' house for breakfast. And so I was like, you know, my mom was serving breakfast, And I was like, nah, I don't eat sausages no more. And my pop like literally stood up and said, since when? He said, you used to fight me over these sausages, so, they don't let you forget where you came from. And it's like, what, I can't change? Specifically when you can show them in scripture, what, I can't be changed from the inside out. You can't respect that, so a lot of it has to do with respecting who you are too. And that's difficult, for people, especially when they saw you grow up. They know all of your faults. They know everything you did. I could tell you a whole bunch of other stories, but I'll leave it at that. But yeah, praise Yah. This was a great study. 1 Corinthians chapter 8 next week. Brothers will jump in chapter 9. Hopefully Jadiel will have his internet working and read ahead. Chapter 9 provides us with quite a bit that is powerful, in our walk, and powerful to our understanding. So praise Yah. Shabbat Shalom.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Shalom, Akuti, and Brohim. Thank you so much for viewing this video. We hope it was helpful to your walk in the truth. Remember to always search the scriptures on your own, to study Abba's word and show yourself approved, according to 2 Timothy 2:15. We invite you to study with us. To join us in a live study, just go to our website at assemblyofyahuah.com and click the Join Us tab. We have something available Wednesday through Saturday of every week. If you've been Baruch or blessed by this video today or any other study, we encourage you to go to the Giving tab on our website. Our elders all have their own ways of income, so none of the giving or proceeds go to them. Instead, it goes to biblical assembly needs. We also encourage you to subscribe to our YouTube channel so that you don't miss any new videos. We sincerely pray that Abba continues to direct your path as you acknowledge Him in all your ways. Much avaha and again shalom.